The underdog is probably one of fiction's most compelling and popular character archetypes. It just makes sense to want to root for the guy who doesn't have much, but who has worked hard to make something of himself. There's a certain something about the journey of an underdog which we can almost always get behind. I say almost always because, along with being one of the most popular character archetypes, that also means it's one of the ones that most people suck at writing. Whether it's an underdog who's not really an underdog donned with plot armor, or an underdog who simply doesn't deserve to win for one reason or another, it can be frustrating to see an underdog story which isn't actually an underdog story, or an underdog story wherein the underdog did not earn their victory or their powers. There are plenty of underdog stories out there, but the David to my Goliath in this video is today's sponsor, Aura. I want you guys to think about a time when a company you trusted announced a data breach involving your personal information. What went through your mind as you processed the news? What actions did you take to respond? And most importantly, what actions did you not take to respond? Because not responding or taking any action in this moment right now could leave you vulnerable to future data breaches. After all, hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every American. So if you live in America like I do, you might want to listen to what I have to say. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth dates. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free online. I don't know about you guys, but as a person who has had their passwords stolen in the past, that sort of thing is incredibly terrifying to me. Oftentimes we think it can't happen to us until it does, and we're left without any idea of what to do or who to call. Even if you're doing your best to keep your identity safe, things like this can still happen. And by the time you realize it has happened, it'll already be too late. That's why it's so important to get ahead of it and prepare for the worst. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information online before, this should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now. But for me personally, I'm not too worried because I use Aura. Aura alerts me if my phone number, email, or social security number is on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to get access to my credit or bank accounts. They also give me up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario ever happen to me again. There's also a ton of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one easy-to-use app. You can go to my link, aura.com/scrit, to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data has been exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now because not only is National Public Data not going to do anything to help you, they're probably not going to face any repercussions for this leak. And if there aren't any repercussions, that more than likely means it's going to happen again. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/scrit and try 2 weeks for free. Anyways, back to the rest of the video. In order to write a good underdog story, I think it's important to think of why we enjoy underdog stories in the first place. Sure, we can point to the relatability of an underdog. We can talk about how everyone likes to root for the underdog more because, in a way, it shows that we ourselves could overcome the odds if we just try hard enough. But I don't think that really drills down to why underdog stories are so compelling in the first place. Sure, it tells us all we might need to know from an audience perspective, but from a writing perspective, we don't really have much of anything to work with here. Oh yeah, make a underdog who is relatable and just like everybody else. Yeah, good luck. No, I think the reason everyone actually loves an underdog story is because an underdog, both as a character and as a person, is always challenged. And they have to be in order to be a true underdog. We don't just enjoy watching an underdog because they are relatable or because they give us hope. We enjoy underdogs because they inspire a certain curiosity within us. We are always made to wonder how our underdog is going to overcome the impossible odds that they've been faced with. A true underdog story is never about the destination. It's about the journey and all the little nuances along the way. The tactics, the teamwork, and the personal development of an underdog are all incredibly important. A good underdog story doesn't just start with the character, it starts with the obstacles. What is the opposition? Who must our underdog defeat on his journey? What impossible things does an underdog need to accomplish? Then, we move on to the plot. The order of when those events happen. Building our underdog slowly, gradually, and then all at once in short, dramatic bursts. Not relying on plot armor or writing ourselves into a corner, but instead building towards those revelations for the underdog to achieve as they make progress. A good underdog story ultimately feels believable. The ways in which an underdog accomplishes his goals must make logical sense within the setting and plot, or else it cheapens the archetype. Imagine being curious of how someone might solve a problem within a story that you're reading. And instead of solving the problem, the character just flips the narrative table and says that it's solved because they say so. You'd feel pretty cheated. And this encircles my point about why you might suck at writing underdogs. The underdog's victory doesn't mean anything, and you're not writing the conflict appropriately. Whenever we say avoid plot armor or writing yourself into a corner, it can be difficult to get any good lessons or advice from that. All right, Jimmy, just don't steer this car into the nearest embankment wall and you'll get a driver's license. It's just not a helpful bit of advice to shout at writers because writers don't often realize the root issue of something like plot armor. Plot armor is not a crutch, it is a bandage. It's a convenient plot device to wrap up an arc and progress the story without thinking too much about the consequences. It is the admission that, yes, I've put my character in an unwinnable scenario, but they win anyways because they have to in order for the story to continue. Sometimes it can help us to choose our battles as authors, and sometimes we do end up using plot armor in order to choose those battles. But in the end, it's always more preferable to create situations for your character where they don't even need to use plot armor in the first place. However, underdogs are particularly susceptible to such things simply because writers spend so much of their time talking about what the protagonist doesn't have and not conveying the unique skills and abilities that they do have. The reason you suck at writing underdogs and the reason you're having to rely on plot armor is because you've failed to equip them with the necessary tools and circumstances that they need to succeed. An underdog in fiction is always meant to succeed in the end, but the compelling part about an underdog is that it's a puzzle waiting to be solved. Some writers are not very good at making or solving puzzles, and opt for just smashing the pieces into place until they have something that kinda looks like a compelling story. So how do we fix an issue like this? It's pretty simple. Give your underdog some tools to win the fight, or accomplish whatever they're doing, but don't make them obvious. In fact, if you can afford to hide those tools in plain sight, the audience will be all the more impressed by your skills as a writer when you finally reveal how they actually overcome those odds. A lot of writing an underdog is in how we choose to hide their advantages from the audience. We've got to make the underdog believable. Normally, an underdog is defined by their lack of power and advantages. However, it's important to know that there is a balance to strike when it comes to the underdog. After all, the less tools we give, the more we begin to rely on plot armor in order to progress the story. But what if the underdog didn't win? After all, a lot of an underdog is meant to be a subversion of expectations. We don't think they should win, but they do it anyway. It's become such a common thing that whenever we see an underdog, we know they're gonna win, we just don't know how. But what if they didn't win? What if we did a double subversion? What if they lost? And this might be another reason that you suck at writing underdogs. You haven't considered that maybe this underdog doesn't deserve to win. As much as some writers might try to convince us that our underdog is totally outmatched, sometimes it doesn't really feel like that. Defeat is a dish best served cold, and it's necessary sustenance for building a compelling narrative. Whether it's a fight, some sort of social encounter, or having something stolen from them, your underdog should lose something, and not in a way which is meaningless either. I know there's a temptation for many writers to dampen the blow of a defeat for their character, much in a similar way to how some writers have difficulty giving their characters flaws which obstruct their goals. The spice and substance of any story is its conflict and the tension caused by it. If our supposed underdog protagonist never seems to be truly challenged by anything they face, then they are only an underdog in name. The underdog is not compelling simply because they find a way to win. The most compelling aspect of an underdog is their ability to be knocked down and get back up. Perhaps the underdog faces an opponent they are simply not prepared for. In that case, a victory for the underdog can mean something other than defeating their opponent in a one-on-one confrontation. It can mean surviving the encounter, or landing an impressive blow on their opponent. It is during moments like these, where your protagonist is truly challenged, that you want to take advantage of the concept of something like a loss. This can build towards a victory and a moment of catharsis down the road. Do not neglect to put such things in your story. I also want to stress that a defeat is not always about whether or not the underdog wins a fight. Let's say that the underdog has a goal that they wanted to accomplish, something they really care about, maybe an opportunity that they really want to capture, only to meet a bump in the road which makes them rethink their strategy. Imagine that the underdog still has some small victories here and there, but their ultimate goal is still very far out of reach. Or perhaps their ultimate goal has been placed even further away than it already was. And this brings me to my next point about underdogs, and that's the topic of small victories. One of the most iconic underdog stories is that of the Rocky movies. And spoiler alert for a nearly 50-year-old movie, but Rocky doesn't actually beat the champion by the end. Imagine that. All the effort, all the training, all the hardship, all of that in the first movie, and he loses. It's a fight that Rocky was never supposed to have, let alone win. And yet it's one of the most iconic endings to a movie of all time. Yes, I know that he gets his victory in the sequel, but this is missing the forest for the trees. Rocky is considered by many to be the gold standard for underdog characters. He doesn't have a ton of talent, but what he lacks in skill he makes up for in pure determination and grit. In this movie, we see Rocky effectively embodying the advice I gave before. He has advantages, they are in plain sight, but they do not get him out of an unwinnable scenario, and they do not overshadow the advantages of his opponent. Apollo, that being the current champion in the movies, is seen as a legend in the sport. He's already set an incredible legacy by the time Rocky challenges him, beaten people who are far greater, more skilled, more powerful, taller, faster, stronger than Rocky. And yet it's Rocky who gives him a run for his money, even if he still loses. It's Rocky who keeps getting up when he's put down. It's Rocky who put the fear of losing into Apollo by showing him that even he can bleed. Rocky didn't win the fight on paper, but Apollo knows how it looks. That's a small victory, and it leads to a greater victory down the road. Apollo knows that fight might have gone differently if there were more rounds in it, and so he seeks to prove that that wasn't the case, that it was just a fluke, that he is still the legend that he knows he is. But Rocky has already taken that aura of invulnerability from Apollo. And that small victory at the end of the first movie is why Rocky is such a great example of an underdog. Rocky didn't win on paper, but he did win the hearts and minds of the people who were rooting for him. And even during the second movie, he is still an underdog. We see the toll that last fight took on Rocky. He can't see very well out of one of his eyes. He doesn't have the same fighting spirit now that he has all the money that comes with fighting for the championship belt. He's gotten a house and a new car for his wife. He tries to quit boxing and live a normal life as a blue-collar worker, only to discover that the life he tried to leave is the life that he was destined for. But even if he knows that, it is in conflict with his wife and her wishes for him. He doesn't want her to worry, and he doesn't want to go back on his promise. He feels like less of a man being unable to provide for this new lifestyle that he's purchased for the two of them. But in order to do the one thing he's actually good at, it would mean betraying the person he would do it for. So when the second movie concludes with Rocky's wife giving him her blessing and permission to go and fight, our underdog is now unburdened by all the things which held him back. His fighting spirit is relit, and he slugs it out with Apollo once more. He doesn't beat Apollo easily either, but he takes Apollo back to that place he feared the most. Rocky shows Apollo that the first time was not a fluke. When you write your underdogs, I think this is the feeling you want to aim for. Allow your underdogs to lose battles, but never the war. An underdog's greatest and most compelling trait is often their defiant grit in the face of overwhelming challenge and hardship. It's not about winning or losing. It's about me taking you on right here and right now. One Punch Man has a great way of depicting underdogs, despite the fact that Saitama, the main character, is the overdog to end all overdogs. That's why One Punch Man chooses to focus on the actual underdogs of the story. The weaker humans who are simply struggling day to day in a world of monsters who go stronger and more terrifying with each passing moment. Not just people like Moomin Rider, but the other heroes as well. From C rank to S rank, all of them are underdogs in the grand scheme of the One Punch Man universe. Just as an example, Boros, that being the alien Saitama defeats in Season 1, could very likely have ended the entire planet and everyone in it if Saitama had not defeated him. It's very clear that Saitama is the only exception when it comes to humans. Every other human is fighting monsters far beyond what they could ever hope to defeat. And if they don't think so, then there's going to be a monster who comes along and shatters that illusion eventually. There's always a bigger fish, and even the S-class heroes can bleed. But that's what makes them so compelling as characters. We see that many of the heroes have some level of competency and power, but then we often see monsters who are far beyond their capacity to defeat. That's why heroes need to group up and work as a team. It's why Saitama exists in the first place. He's the ultimate safety net for all the other underdogs in his story. He's the reason all of them can struggle and fight until their last breath. From a narrative standpoint, Saitama is basically a spotter at the gym. He'll let you move the weight, he'll even let you fail the rep, but he'll eventually pull that bar up for you when it's about to crush your trachea. And yeah, he doesn't really do it on purpose, but his airheaded and casual nature is what enables the underdogs to struggle in the first place, without Saitama becoming basically an asshole character who just wants to aura farm and look at things and wait for the right moment to come in and save everybody. Once again, we see the principles of an underdog put to work in One Punch Man. They are allowed to lose. In fact, the heroes in One Punch Man lose quite often. However, they're always showing some sort of growth, always unlocking new levels of strength they had never had before, simply because they were forced to face their own weakness in a almost traumatizing way. Many of them would have seen their potential unrealized if Saitama did not exist to save them when they needed it most. That's the mark of a true hero, and an underdog's main catalyst for growth is struggle against insurmountable odds. However, it's important to make note that while an underdog should not be likely to win their fight, it should also not be impossible for them to win. This is where we see people who suck at writing underdogs. Solo Leveling is a great example of this, but so is Sword Art Online. Both of these shows have a fight which they simply shouldn't have fucking won under any circumstances because it doesn't make any sense in the logic of the universe that it's in. It's not a believable victory, in other words. Now, minor spoilers for the manhwa of Solo Leveling and Season 1 of SAO. In Solo Leveling, we come to find out that the system that Sung Jin-woo has been gaining his powers from is something which was created by a character known as Kendiaru. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce his name. Anyways, Kenny, he tries to help this guy named Ashbourne, and Ashbourne is someone who is considered a monarch, which is a hyper-powerful dimensional being, as well as the source of Jinwoo's purple powers. It's a whole fucking thing. Candiaru built the system to help Ashbourne create a human vessel strong enough to absorb his powers and use them to their maximum potential without any limitations. It was designed with a video game interface so that Sung Jin-woo could interpret the system without any confusion, because he's such an epic gamer. Now, you might already be saying, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But wait, there's more. Basically, the guy who created the system gets in a fight with Sung Jin-woo. Why? I'm not really sure. I think it was because he wanted Sung to just disappear mentally so that his old master Ashbourne could take control again or something. Regardless, Kendiaru has the power to completely lock him out of the system he created and dismantle all of his progress. And then Jin-woo kind of just says, nuh-uh, and beats him anyway. This is the equivalent of a Minecraft survival player killing someone in creative mode. It just doesn't make any sense. Jin-woo tries to justify this ass-pull to the audience by stating that he broke past the system, which is a very cliche reveal, but it's also counter to anything we see leading up to that point. I mean, think about it. Throughout all of Solo Leveling, we don't really see Sung Jin-woo breaking out of the system or going against it at all. If anything, he is completely and utterly reliant on the power that the system gives him in order to succeed in his aura farming endeavors. Everything he has, every ounce of power he is capable of wielding, even his emotions of being calm under pressure, is because of the system that was given to him. Randomly. It's not even like he was special. He's just a random guy that happened to be in the right place at the right time. And Candiaro basically said, yeah, you're the one, buddy. He never broke out of the system. He never subverted it or went against its suggestions. He played the game as intended and just somehow leveled high enough to get admin privileges. This is an example of an unwinnable scenario being defeated by plot armor. By every metric, Jinwoo should not have won this fight. Well, that is, unless the writing was actually competent. Because if that was the case, then the writer would have allowed the other characters who were there to help Jinwoo beat this unwinnable scenario. We could have seen the other S ranks banding together to defeat the system from the outside and bring Candiaru down. But because the author is so addicted to blowing his load over Jinwoo's ass cheeks and the power fantasy of leveling solo, we see Jinwoo somehow manage to take control of the system that gave him his powers in the first place, and then destroy Candiaru by himself. What's crazy is that the other S-rank heroes are literally there to help him, only to do pretty much nothing and contribute almost nothing to his success. They couldn't even snap him out of his system-induced coma during the fight. It was literally all Jinwoo. Like, he snapped himself out of the coma. He took himself out of the system. He beat Candiaru by himself, and the other S-rank heroes just watch from the sidelines despite trying to help, and then they just glaze him afterwards for being so cool and strong. The same goes for Sword Art Online. We have an infamous scene where Kirito figures out that the head developer for their death game has been fighting alongside them the whole time. He attacks the guy and a fight ensues. The guy is literally the game dev who created the game, and he has access to all of the admin privileges he needs to basically be in God mode. He is shown previously to have infinite health and the ability to pause the game or activate a cheat code, which makes him always hit his attacks and never get hit. Kirito and Asuna are both pretty much killed by him. Kirito's got a sword in him as he's about to lose all of his health, and he just screams really loud and attacks, and that somehow works. These are both very similar scenarios, which could have been written in a much more narratively satisfying way if the author had just considered how the other characters might help them. But they weren't written well simply because the author was too narrowed in their focus on a power fantasy over telling a compelling narrative. And by the way, neither of these characters are underdogs, even though the story often likes to paint the two of them as such. They're overdogs at best and Mary Sue's at worst. In any case, the easy fix, once again, in this unwinnable scenario, is just to use outside characters. Allow the underdog to get help. If we allow the other characters of the story to support the underdog and help them defeat a foe they should never win against, then that is a perfectly valid way of writing a good underdog character. In fact, even to this day, Goku from Dragon Ball is always the underdog of his story, despite how powerful he gets. During the biggest arcs against the most powerful bad guys in Dragon Ball Z and beyond, Goku never wins his fights by himself. He always has to rely on others in order to win. Sure, he gets the last hit every time, but Toriyama at least understands how to write a good underdog, even if the underdog is powerful, and even if there are many things he doesn't understand how to write. Teamwork is one of the pillars of an underdog character, and you would do well to remember that for your story. Give your supporting characters something to do during a difficult encounter. That's what makes a fight so interesting in a story. It's also one of the things JJK does extremely well for most of its run. Alone, one character might not be able to defeat a big threat, but if the characters just jump the villains, then they might be able to win. Human beings can bring down mammoths with enough planning and teamwork. But this brings me to my next point as to why you might suck at writing underdogs. It's because you failed to capture the essence of what an underdog represents. The reason we all relate to an underdog so much is simply because all of us have been an underdog at some point in our lives. Whether it was learning a new skill, competing in a competition, or even just trying to get out of bronze in your favorite video game that you totally love to play and never seethe over, even when they taunt you or emote on you. When we see the underdog win, it gives us hope that we too might be able to beat those odds if we try hard enough. But an underdog victory is not a solitary endeavor. Human beings as a species were the underdogs for the majority of our time on this planet. We were eaten by giant birds, hunted by lions, stomped by mammoths. Human beings are neither the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the largest or smallest creatures in the world. We do not have natural armor nor weapons, and we could not defeat most animals our size without weapons or training. And yet, human beings are persistent. We are clever. We might not be the fastest, but we can run for a longer distance than any animal. We chase our prey to exhaustion. We might not be the strongest, and we've neither sharp teeth nor claws, but the tools and weapons we create amplify the force that we can generate. We can kill things from a far range, or keep them at bay with a spear. We can throw rocks or create armor from the materials we find. We might not have the best senses, but we are social creatures. We build societies and tame other animals who do have good senses. We form structures which protect us from the wilderness. And most of all, we don't just learn from our mistakes, but also the mistakes of others. We compound our knowledge and pass it down to the next generation. In a world of powerful apex predators, the human being was never meant to succeed. We were never meant to become the most dominant species on the planet. We did so through careful thought, planning, and teamwork. Our intelligence and our connections to one another are by far our greatest strengths, and it's what helps us overcome insurmountable odds. It is these two things which can help us move mountains. So connect with the world. Be good to those around you. Document your failures. Understand your shortcomings, and find your strengths among them. Share your thoughts with the world, form new connections, and never give up even when it seems impossible. You are the underdog of your own story and the master of your own destiny. So in this moment, take action, open up a document, and start writing.